Hello class, today we are going to discuss Chapter 6 and Chapter 6 deals with presentment for payment. Just to apprise you, if it is a promissory note, we just have one presentment and that is presentment for payment. But if it is a bill of exchange, it needs to have two presentments, no? And that is these are the presentment for acceptance and presentment for payment. But the discussion on the bill of exchange, we will have that on the next chapter. So suffice it to say for now that we will be discussing presentment for payment. What is presentment for payment? By presentment for payment, a presentment for payment is meant the presentation of the instrument, example the promissory note or the accepted bill, to the person primarily liable for the purpose of demanding and receiving payment. So presentment for payment is the process of presenting it to the person primarily liable for the purpose of demanding and receiving payment. Now, Section 70 tells us that presentment for payment is not necessary in order to charge the person primarily liable on the instrument. But if the instrument is by its term payable to a special place, and he is able and willing to pay it there at maturity, such ability and willingness are equivalent to the tender of payment upon his part. But, except as herein otherwise provided, presentment for payment is necessary in order to charge the drawer and the endorsers. Presentment for payment is not necessary in order to charge the person primarily liable, but presentment for payment is necessary in order to charge the person secondarily liable. And person secondarily liable, when you say person secondarily liable, we speak of the drawer and the endorser. Why is that so? Because the liability of persons primarily liable is attached, na? Their liability is attached once the persons primarily liable will not pay. No? So the liability of the person secondarily liable attaches when the person primarily liable will not pay or refuses to pay. Okay? So please take note of that. Presentment for payment is not necessary to charge persons primarily liable, but it is necessary in order to charge persons secondarily liable. Section 71. Presentment where the instrument is not payable on demand and when it is payable on demand. When the instrument is not payable on demand, the presentment must be on the day it falls due. So you do your presentment for payment on due date. Where it is payable on demand, presentment must be made within reasonable time after its issue. So ibig sabihin, pag dated siya, on due date, you do the presentment for payment. But if it is not dated as when it is payable on demand, then you present it for payment within reasonable time after its last issue. Again, what is issue? It is the movement of the negotiable instrument from the maker to the payee or from the drawer to the payee. Except that in case of bill of exchange, presentment for payment will be sufficient if made within reasonable time after the last negotiation of the instrument. So if it is a promissory note after its last issue, if it is a bill of exchange after its last negotiation. Okay, 3 points here in Article 71. When will you do your presentment of payment? You do your presentment of payment on the day it falls due. If there is no due date in the instrument, no, then if it is a promissory note, within reasonable time after its last issue, and if it is a bill of exchange, within reasonable time after its last negotiation. Okay, please take note of that, and that is covered by Section 71. Okay, Section 72. What constitutes presentment for payment? Presentment for payment to be sufficient must be done by the following: by the holder or by some person authorized to receive payment on his behalf, no? By the holder himself or the one he authorizes. At a reasonable hour on a business day, at a proper place as herein defined, and to the person primarily liable on the instrument, or if he is absent or inaccessible, to any person found at the place where the presentment is to be made. So presentment should be made by the holder or his representative to the person primarily liable or to his representative within reasonable hour of the business day at a place properly defined therein. So you take note of these four requisites in order to enforce valid presentment for payment. The place of presentment. Presentment for payment is made at a proper place when, letter A, where a place for payment is specified in the instrument and it is there presented. Nakasulat sa instrument mismo. Letter B, where no place of payment is specified, but the address of the person to make payment is given in the instrument and it is there presented. Pag walang payment na nakaspecify, proper presentment is at the place the person to make payment. No? But the address of the person to make payment, ibig sabihin sino ang magbabayad? Yung person primarily liable. No? So, the presumption is that if the place is not designated, the proper presentment for payment is in the address of the person primarily liable. Where no place of payment is specified and no address is given, and the instrument is presented at the usual place of business or the residence of the person making payment. So, una, place identified. Second is that pag wala yon, dun sa address na naka-indicate ng person primarily liable. Pag wala yun, dun sa business place or residence of the person primarily liable. Or in any other case, if presented to the person to make payment wherever he could be found or presented at his last known place of business or residence. Nakita mo siya sa mall, on due date na siya, walang A, walang place specified, walang address, walang business address, pwede mo siyang singilin sa mall. Okay? That is covered by Section 73. Now, in Section 74, it is necessary that the instrument must be exhibited. The instrument must be exhibited to the person for whom the payment is demanded, and when it is paid, it must be delivered up to the party paying it. So, surrender. No, you surrender the negotiable instrument. And the presumption is that if the negotiable instrument is found in the hands of the person primarily liable, the presumption there is that the negotiable instrument was paid. Take note of that. Okay? 75. Presentment where the instrument is payable at a bank. Where the instrument is payable at a bank, presentment for payment must be made during banking hours, unless the person to make payment has no funds there to meet it anytime during the day, in which case presentment is at any hour before the bank is closed on that day is sufficient. So, pag bangko siya within reasonable banking hour. Now, what if presentment for payment when the principal debtor is dead? Where the person primarily liable on the instrument is dead and no place of payment is specified, presentment of payment must be made to his personal representative, underline personal representative, if such there be, and if with the exercise of reasonable diligence, where the representative could be found, not the dead person, where the representative could be found. Okay, this is the issue class. No? When a person dies, his assets and liabilities are transferred into a hypothetical entity called the estate. So pag Juan de la Cruz, pag namatay si Juan de la Cruz, another hypothetical entity is born, and that is the estate of Juan de la Cruz. It would really depend if Juan de la Cruz died, intestate or testate. Ibig sabihin may last will and testament or walang last will and testament. If namatay siya with last will and testament, you present that to the executor, no? To the executor. But if there is no last will and testament, you present that to the administrator. The administrator is usually appointed by the court. However, oftentimes, pag extrajudicial siya, among the heirs, they decide as to who is the administrator de facto. Okay? So, the presentation of the instrument should be done to the executor or the administrator of the estate of the deceased person para isasama yan siya sa listahan ng claims against the estate. Okay? That is 76. 77. Presentment to persons liable as partners. No? Dalawa sila liable. Where the persons primarily liable on the instrument are liable as partners and no place of payment is specified, presentment for payment may be made to any one of them even though there has been the dissolution of the firm. Okay, so partnership class, merong principle na mutual agency, no? Where presentation of where notice to one partner is notice to all, no? Partner. So, hanapin ninyo if the partnership is already dissolved, hanap kayo ng isang partner, na isang partner, then you present to him the instrument for satisfaction because notice to the partner is notice to the partnership. Okay, 78, presentment to joint debtors, where there are several persons not partners primarily liable on the instrument and no place is specified, the presentment must be made to all of them. Dito sa 77 class, the presumption there is that there is partnership. And in partnership, every partner is an agent of the partnership. In 78 naman, joint debtors, not solidary ha, joint debtors. So, presentment must be made to all of them. Okay? Clear tayo dyan, ha? 79. When presentment not required in order to charge the drawer. In the premise of yung first section na binasa natin, necessary ang presentment for payment in order to charge parties secondarily liable, di ba? Not the primary liable but the secondary liable. Secondary liable, person secondary liable are drawers and endorsers. In 79, this is the exception to that rule. Presentment for 79, section 79. Presentment for payment is not required in order to charge the drawer where he has no right to expect or require the drawee or the acceptor will pay the instrument. No, ibig sabihin the drawer is a fictitious, no? Fictitious person. Presentment for payment is not required in order to charge the drawer where he has no right to expect or require the drawee or the acceptor will pay the same. Ibig sabihin, gawa niya lang yung instrument without really bearing in mind, no? Or without any assurance that the drawee or the acceptor will pay the instrument. Most likely, the drawee is fictitious or the acceptor accepted to his accommodation and the like. Na? So, the drawee is fictitious in this instant case. In that case, the presentment for payment is not required. When presentment for payment is not required to charge an endorser, another party secondarily liable. Where presentment for payment is not required in order to charge the endorser, where the instrument was made or accepted for his accommodation, and he has no reason to expect that the instrument will be paid if presented. Okay? If it is done for his accommodation, for the accommodation of the endorser, no? So, presentment for payment is not necessary in order to for his liability to be attached. Okay. Section 81. When delay in making presentment excuse, di ba pag promissory note within reasonable time after its issue, pag bill of exchange within reasonable time after its last negotiation. Delay in making presentment for payment is excused when the delay is caused by circumstances beyond the control of the holder and not imputable to his fault, misconduct, or negligence. When the cause of delay ceases to operate, presentment for payment must be made with reasonable diligence. So, for instances beyond this control, beyond the control of the holder, delay in the presentment for payment may be excused, no? Or may be justified. 82. When presentment of payment may be dispensed with, ito siya, pwede ka na hindi mag-presentment for payment, no? Presentment for payment is dispensed with when letter A, when after exercise of reasonable diligence, presentment as required by this act cannot be made. Okay? It's despite reasonable diligence, presentment is cannot be made. Where the drawee is a fictitious person. Drawee is a fictitious person. We have this that is covered by section 79, where the drawer has no right to expect that the drawee will accept the instrument. Yan yon, by waiver of presentment expressed or implied. So sinabi mo doon, presentment, I promise to pay X or order the sum of this much, Presentment for payment waive. Ibig sabihin, you expressly place it in the negotiable instrument that there is no more need for the presentment for payment to be done. Okay. Okay, 83.